Good morning. I'd like to call this regular board meeting to order. Please join with us to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we start our regular meeting this morning, we do have a couple of housekeeping issues that we need to attend to. First being swearing in of the chairman. You cannot hear it. I can't.
It's not. All right.
There, Joe's here. Yep, Joe's here. I'll try not to. I'll try not to. I think so they can't hear.
Oh.
Madam Clerk, hold the Bible today. Morgan, Ray, and Olivia. Approve.
Motion to reconsider.
I will solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Chairman of the Essex County Board of Supervisors according to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Walk it around. The Thanks, Graham. You're up there, old dog. Didn't we already do it? Didn't we already do it? The shoulders.
Now, hopefully from now on, I'll be my right foot forward. So, with that, thank you very much to my colleagues. Now we'll go into swearing in the vice chairman.
Where's Michelle? Michelle. Yeah, I know he loves you. I'd rather have Michelle.
You're right. I, Randy President, solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
That I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Vice Chairman of the Essex County Board of Supervisors according to the best of my ability.
sure my guys will.
That's looking good.
At the end of the meeting.
Chair, thank you. Motion ready? That's perfect.
Congratulations.
All right. Now, would you like for me to do my congratulations, buddy? What is it? Oh, yeah, sure.
And then we'll do the call.
Sure. Roll call.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to begin this morning with just a little bit of history. 30 years ago, a chairman of the Board of Supervisors resigned over a dispute with the then Social Service Commissioner, resulting in the Vice Chairman, Don DeMacy, stepping up to the new chair. The transition went well, and the system continued to work. Similar situation, different circumstances today. As it was 30 years ago, and as it may be as well today, in some eyes, I may not be the best replacement for Chairman Douglas. However, I promise to do the best, not to fill his shoes, but to provide a quality leadership, and I thank this humble body for your support. I would like to thank my grandson Trey, my grandson Drew, and my granddaughter Olivia for taking time away from school. They were kicking and screaming as they came to the car, but thank you very much for doing that and assisting me in this, in my oath today, and my family for their continued support, and as well as my office staff of the town of Keene. Without their hard work and dedication, my position as town supervisor would be impossible. I would also like to thank the constituents of the town of Keene. Without their continued support, I would not be in the position that I am in today. Becoming chairman has made many people question as to what are my plans, what am I going to do? All of a sudden, I actually have to formulate my goals and objectives. I would like to outline some of those goals for you now. To begin to follow the path that Chairman Douglas and this board has previously blazed. However, let me add this caveat. I'm not afraid to lead us on a new path if necessary. To be willing to show the board and our constituents the big picture that we must see if we are to continue to lead this county. And I would just like to touch on a few of the issues that we have ahead of us. The coming year, we have a new CSEA contract renewal. The transfer stations in many of our towns are in need of upgrading and maintenance. The county septic system, as you all know, as county employees this winter, didn't go downhill. The nutrition building. We're forced with replacing our nutrition center that provides food for our elderly. So that is a must that we must address. Cornell Cooperative Extension Building has issues. The fish hatchery, big issues. The county complex roof needs to be completed. The highway garage exterior work. Public safety building maintenance issues. Our new purchasing policy. Occupancy tax and vacation rental review. We have a Quonset hut that is full of old records along with mold and asbestos. The building is locked. We cannot gain access to the building, so we need to address that. We need to get into the building and address those records. Not to mention the large number of county bridges that need to be addressed. And this is just a few of the things that in the coming year that we have got to focus on taking care of. To commence the 2016 budget process, being a member of the Budget Salary Committee, I've listened to many of the department heads who have addressed the committee. We will definitely review these requests prior to the budget process. I intend to investigate as a board with the sheriff and the district attorney previous and past injustices. To work hand in hand with the four most powerful people in the county government, the elected officers, the treasurer, the sheriff, the district attorney, and the county clerk. As these four sit down as one, their authority is seconded by none. To encourage and cultivate bipartisan environment on the board in order to provide quality decisions for the county. County government has been nicknamed as a government of service. but we can't provide quality service without our state funding. We will continue to advocate for more state money in order to allow us to meet the needs of our people. Throughout the county, we hear the call for infrastructure is deteriorating around us. We must find ways to keep our roads safe. I will assemble a committee to review the motor vehicle use tax, a subject that has been listened to in previous years but never addressed properly. As opposed to some are, road safety is paramount. To continue a building project with a nutrition kitchen for our Meals on Wheels program, to provide office space for our soil and water, and whatever is left, find space for countywide 18 towns, 2 villages, 1 county record center. Everyone dismisses the need for record storage until one of us needs it to get us out of trouble. And by the way, it's the law. I intend to meet with all elected officials and their staff. I'll meet with department heads and staff, and to continue to lead a dedicated group of individuals on this board as we work forward for our town. In closing, for those who did not have a chance to see the front page of the Press Republican this morning, and my intention is not to start out on a sour note with the press, but the front page in bold red and black letters says that Clinton County and Plattsburgh was named one of the best places to live. That's an apparent typo. It clearly should have said Essex County and the town of Keene should have been named the best place to live. With that, thank you all for coming to this today. We'll now continue our meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Morrow?
Here.
Mr. Harrington?
Here.
Mr. Merrihew has been excused. Mr. Gardner? Mr. Douglas?
Here.
Mr. Farabee?
Here.
Mr. Blades?
Here.
Mr. McNally?
Here.
Mr. Skalzala?
Here.
Mr. Cannon?
Here.
Mr. Cleary? Mr. Moore? Mr. Marnell? Mr. Whitson? Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell? Mr. Gluen has been excused. Mr. Preston? I just want to let everyone know that the resolutions are misnumbered. They're off by 2 because of the special board meeting. So we're going to start actually with resolution number 148. And it's authorizing budget amendments for various departments.
Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington? Mr. Merrihew is excused. Mr. Gardner? Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skalzala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon? Mr. Cleary? Mr. Moore? Mr. Marnell? Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gluen has been excused, and Mr. Preston.
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 149, authorizing the Public Health Department to apply for and accept a grant from the New York State Chapter March of Dimes with funding ranging from $25,000 to $100,000 to enhance services for pregnant women with chronic diseases that increase the risk for premature birth and provide premature birth risk education and services in Essex County, and further authorizing the chairman or county manager to execute the same.
Moved by Mr. Blades. Have a second, Mr. Marnell. Comments or questions? All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, it is a roll call.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington? Mr. Merrihew? Is excused. Mr. Gardner? Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades? Mr. McNally? Mr. Skalzala? Mr. Cannon? Mr. Cleary? Mr. Moore? Mr. Marnell? Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell? Mr. Gluen has been excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 150, changing the date of the June 2015 regular board meeting from June 1st to June 2nd.
Moved by Mr. Cannon. Comments or questions? All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carries.
Resolution number 151, authorizing the county chairman and/or county manager to execute a $120,000 FY 2015 state Homeland Security Security Program agreement through the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services.
Moved by Mr. Douglas, second by Mr. Moore. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow? Yes. Mr. Harrington? Mr. Merry, excuse Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson? Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell? Mr. Gluin has been excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 152, authorizing the issuance of a permit allowing the use of county roadways for the Wilmington Circuit Race to be held on Sunday, May 31st, 2015.
Moved by Mr. Preston, second by Mr. Douglas. Comments or questions? None, all in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 153, authorizing the issuance of a permit allowing the use of county roadways for the Wilmington Whiteface Bicycle Road Race to be held on Saturday, May 30th, 2015.
Moved by Mr. Preston. Second, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Moore. Comments or questions? None, all in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution number 154, authorizing the purchasing agent on behalf of the Public Works Department to go out to bid or purchase from state contract, award and purchase a new pickup truck in the amount not to exceed $35,000 from budgeted funds.
Moved by Mr. Morrow, second by Mr. Gardner. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Merry, who is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Marnell? Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gluin is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 155, authorizing the Essex County Chairman or County Manager to execute an agreement with the Essex County Soil and Water District to provide access to Stiles Brook to perform a 3-day emergency stream training session, together with the provision of acceptability insurance and approval of the county attorney.
Move that, please. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Moore. Comments or questions? None, all in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution number 156, authorizing the appointment of William L. Reed to the Essex County Ethics Board to fill the unexpired term of Michael Otiselli.
I'd like to move that as well, please. Second, Mr. Blades. Comments or questions? None, all in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 157, authorizing the county chairman or county manager to execute an extension of the contract between Federal Engineering and Essex County through October 31st, 2015.
Moved by Mr. Preston, second by Mr. Moore. Comments or questions? Not, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Merry, who is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty? Mr. Moore? Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gluin is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
The resolution carries. Resolution number 158, authorizing a contract or contract amendment with Architect Engineering and Land Surveying Northeast in an amount up to $5,000 for preliminary design documents for the purpose of grant submission as it relates to the construction of the nutrition building, which funds are to come from capital project.
Moved by Mr. Whitson, second by Mr. Cannon. Mr. Harrington. Comments or questions? None, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Merry, who is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gluin is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution 159 of appreciation and congratulations to the Schoon Lake senior citizens on their upcoming 40th anniversary in October 2015.
Moved by Mr. Marnell. Second. Thank you.
Resolution 160 of congratulations to Ann B. McDonald as recipient of the 2015 Liberty Bell Award from the Essex County Bar Association.
Moved by Mr. Grinnell.
Second.
Thank you.
Resolution 161, authorizing to change the hours in the county treasurer and county clerk's offices to be open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. for the months of June, July, and August 2015.
Moved by Mr. Connell. Second. Second, Mr. Morrow. Comments or questions? Being none, all in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 162 of appreciation to Keith Ozier upon his retirement from services with the Essex County Real Property Tax Services.
Moved by Mr. Grinnell. Second. Thank you.
Resolution 163, authorizing the acceptance of an amendment to the terms and conditions of letters patent dated March 4th, 2011, for the purposes of the sale of surplus fish to the general public and for commercial purposes, and hereby authorizes the county chairman or county manager to execute any and all documents necessary for these purposes.
Moved by Mr. Harrington. Mr. Moore. Comments or questions? None, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Fairby?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Glillen is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 164, authorizing the Essex County Chairman or County Manager to enter into an agreement with Fawn Ridge LLC for a temporary construction easement and right-of-way for access to Algonquin Bridge for purposes of the replacement and reconstruction of the bridge in exchange for Essex County agreeing to improve the existing roadways as the same extends from Old Military Road to Algonquin Bridge.
Moved by Mr. Palooty, second by Mr. Morrow. Comments or questions? None, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Fairby?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Glillen is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 165 of thanks and appreciation to Randall T. Douglas.
Moved by all of us. Unanimous second.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Douglas, if we could ask you to step forward, please.
Resolution of congratulations to Randall T. Douglas, Chairman of the Essex County Board of Supervisors, for his exemplary service to the County of Essex and the Town of Jay, and as Essex County Supervisor for the years 2004-2015. And reads, whereas Randall T. Douglas, Chairman of the Essex County Board of Supervisors, has served the County of Essex, the Town of Jay, from 2004 to 2015. And whereas Chairman Douglas has served with honor and distinguished himself as the Chairman of the Essex County Board of Supervisors for the unprecedented sixth degree. And whereas his political pedigree spanned well over 50 years, having been preceded as a member of this body by his grandfather, Arthur J. Douglas, 1966 to 1972, and his father, Thomas A. Douglas, 1973 to 1980, 1998 to 2000, each of whom saw in him the importance of civic responsibility, duty to his fellow man, integrity, and honesty. And whereas during his tenure of Board, Randall T. Douglas has been a workhorse and tireless advocate for the County of Essex and for the township at the local, state, and federal level, actively searching and securing county, state, and federal grants and programs bringing millions of dollars to the economy and the county and to the towns. And whereas this balanced interest, confidence, and precedent, Essex County is the envy of all state and counties and its place in the forefront of grant programs, disbursements, and aid. And whereas Chairman Douglas totally immersed himself in the day-to-day operation, management, and oversight of all Essex County businesses carefully examining county finances and enduring cuts, expenses, and increases revenue wherever possible. Whereas no issue was too small, no constituent too insignificant, no problem too immersible, as he performed his duties and responsibilities with confidence, leadership, character, and resilience. And whereas throughout his tenure, Chairman Douglas has remained a man of humility and has possessed a strong and constant moral compass, adhering to his personal convictions even when political, unpopular, or against public opinion, but never shrinking or from thought in controversial decisions. Whereas Chairman Douglas got things done, including provided for all constituents authority, managed the county at a savvy and skilled politically while at the same time recognizing the delicate balance that politics plays in the lives of every man and that they relate to the county and its township. And whereas Chairman Douglas possessed a compelling public presence and an unrestrained personality who never loses sight of his family, his faith, or his responsibility. And whereas history will well remember Chairman Douglas Randall T. Baker as one of the finest chairmen of Essex County Board of Supervisors, as a tough, antagonist, and skilled politician. He dealt quickly with difficulties and controversial issues, mediated and settled complicated disputes, and took careful measures of the consequences of his decisions. And whereas Randall T. Douglas was a true friend and colleague to all the members of the board, whether Democrat, Republican, or Independent, and fostered an atmosphere of political inclusion and cooperation unprecedented in modern America. And whereas Chairman Douglas has been a proponent of open government and has always been accessible to his constituents, the public, and his colleagues, day or night. And whereas Chairman Douglas has with mixed emotions tendered his registration as a member of the Essex County Board of Supervisors and a supervisor of the town of Jay effective this date, and will be taking a job as a member of the New York State Unemployment Insurance Board. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Essex County Board of Supervisors, its clerk of the board, county manager, county attorney, its friends, hereby extend their sincere congratulations and deep divine appreciation and gratitude to Chairman Randall T. Douglas for his outstanding and exceptional contributions to the government of Essex County and to his constituents, and further extend the best wishes and good luck to him and his family in the position and all of his future endeavors.
Randy, don't sit down, I have another plaque to read. Just kidding. Okay, continuing on with resolutions.
Resolution number 166, accepting the mortgage tax report.
Moved by Mr. Connell, second by Mr. Scottafather. Comments or questions? Being none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Maryhill is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Here. Yes.
Mr. Paliti?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Glillen is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 167, authorizing the purchase of whitewater rescue equipment for the town of Jay and the town of Keene Fire Departments in the amount of $37,403 from grant funds.
Moved by Mr. Douglas and myself, second by Mr. Grinnell, Mr. Preston. Comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Maryhill is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell? Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliland is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. Resolution number 168 of appreciation to Carol Jonette for her many years of service to the Essex County Occupancy Tax Committee and the Essex County Visitors Bureau.
Moved by Mr. Palooty.
Second.
Thank you.
Resolution 169 of condolence to the family of Lawrence Larry Monroe Bliss.
Moved by Mr. Gardner.
Second.
Thank you.
Resolution 170, authorizing the Office for the Aging Department to apply for and accept a 2-year grant from the Balancing Incentive Program in the total amount of $167,783.25, and further authorizing a budget amendment in the 2015 Essex County budget to increase revenues and appropriations in the amount of $80,206.41, which is for year 1 of the BIP grant, and further authorizing the chairman or county manager to execute the same.
Moved by Mr. Blades. Have a second? Second by Mr. Connell and Mr. Moore. Comments or questions? If none, I'll roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Maryhill is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliland is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
The resolution carries. Resolution number 171, authorizing the Essex County Chairman or County Manager to execute the Upper Hudson Recreation Hub Grant Program, bearing the contract number NHT 603-3 for the Micro Enterprise Grant Program between the 5-Town Hub Grant between Essex County and the towns of Indian Lake, Long Lake, Minerva, North Hudson, and Newcomb, in the total amount of $256,750 as recommended by the Hub Grant Review Committee, and to execute any and all associated subrecipient agreements or other documentation.
Moved by Mr. Cannon, Mr. Moore, and Mr. McNally. Second. Second. Mr. Harrington. Comments or questions? None, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Maryhill is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliland is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries.
Resolutions from the floor.
Should I just read them? Resolution authorizing a contract renewal with Heraff Auction and Realty Incorporated.
We have 1211 on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Moved by Mr. Harrington, second by Mr. Marnell and Mr. Skozavala. Comments or questions? None, all in favor, aye, or excuse me, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Maryhill is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Palooty?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell? Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliland is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
The resolution carries.
Further resolutions from the floor.
I have resolution adopting the Essex County Purchasing Policy dated June 2015.
We have 1211 on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Moved by Mr. Skozavala. Second. Second, Mr. Cannon. Comments or questions? Roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, you is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala? Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Pleady?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell? Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Because this continues to contain the best value policy, Ticonderoga votes no.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliland is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries. That's all I have.
Other resolution from the floor, Mr. Preston.
Like a resolution for the county to apply for a Northern Border Regional Commission grant. And this is for a rec path on the Fox Farm Road in the town of Wilmington.
At 12, we'll allow that on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Moved by Mr. Preston. Second? Second, Mr. Harrington. Comments or questions? None? Roll call.
Just a question, is there a county match associated with that? No.
Randy, can you get me that information?
Right here.
Okay, great.
Spending.
I don't even know what it is.
Do you want one?
There's no county match.
No county.
Yeah, Mike would be applying. Yes.
I don't even know.
Is that from Mike's office that he's going to be applying? Yes.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Carried. Other resolutions from the floor?
Mr. Chairman, I have three I'd like to bring up. They're all for different organizations in the town. The first one is recognition of the Minerva Fire Department celebrating 65 years of service.
12, we'll allow that on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Second?
Second. The next one would be the Minerva Historical Society, which is also celebrating this year 60 years of continuous service.
12, we'll allow that on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Second?
And the last one is the Minerva Senior Meal Site, who also this year is celebrating 30 years of service.
12, we'll allow that on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Second? Thank you. Hello, Mr. McGowan.
Yes, thank you.
Any further resolutions from the floor? Mr. Douglas?
Yes, I'd like to put on the floor, we've dealt with this issue before, but I think it's appropriate to have a closeout today one way or another. Brought forward by the sheriff, it's a request for reimbursement for Medicare Part B for any disabled former employee with at least 20 years of service. And I think Dan ran some more numbers, and I know the sheriff has, but I'd like to move that today.
12, we'll allow that on the floor.
Can you put your hands up, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 8 or 7. We do not.
Do not have 12 for you. Thank you. Any further resolutions come from the floor? Dan?
I just have a few items. The George Moore lawsuit that we're currently involved in, oral argument, the judges asked for oral argument. That'll occur on June 5th, this Friday at 10 o'clock, should any of you want to attend. Also, I just want to clarify that the town of North Hudson is still interested in this property, and your interest hasn't waned. And you still need that for the parking area and for the two easements. Is that correct, Mr. Moore?
Yes, it is, and I just add to that in a meeting with DEC Commissioner Joe Martens and Secretary of the Environment, Basil Seagos, they express an ongoing interest and have for quite a number of months now as to the status of that litigation. It's very important for the connecting trail systems between the 5 towns from this Finch Prine purchase that we have access and parking capabilities. So I would just, it's not just North Hudson that's involved with this, it's the 5 towns, it's the DEC, it's the Department of Environment. Thank you.
Thanks very much. One other thing I have is, this regards the Elizabethtown Community Hospital. When the hospital did its renovations back, I apologize, I've misplaced the file, but I know the information, I just don't know the exact dates. I believe it was in 2002, 2001. They participated in a program with the Essex County Industrial Development Agency, wherein what generally happens is they convey their property to the IDA, the project goes forward, and at the end of the project, when it's finished, it's a funding stream, the IDA reconveys back to the Elizabethtown Community Hospital. That was done, but when the IDA takes title to these pieces of property, they're required to file with the Essex County Real Property a statement that they're a not-for-profit organization and not to be taxed. That's done regularly, but in this instance, when the conveyance was made from Elizabethtown Community Hospital, which is a mandatory not-for-profit, they're not-for-profit anyway. When the conveyance was made to them into the IDA, the next year, the IDA did not file for that exemption. They missed it by 2 days. Therefore, they were taxed $25,706 on that building they should not have been taxed on had they filed that exemption document. This wasn't discovered until recently, so this has gone on since 2003. There's been an accumulation of interest on that of $40,720.12 plus $41,067.86. So there is an outstanding balance of $67,862.11, which shouldn't have been there had that document been filed. I've checked the law on this, and even though it was missed by a couple of days, I don't feel that we can waive the $25,706.66, unfortunately. It was a mistake. I've tried to find a way to do it, but there just isn't. It can't be done. However, I think in all fairness, this board should waive the interest and penalties in the amount of $41,067.86, as this was not the fault of the hospital. It was the fault of the IDA by missing this by a couple of days. So I'm asking for a resolution authorizing the waiver of penalties and interest in the amount of $41,067.86 relative to property owned by the Elizabethtown Community Hospital, bearing Town of Elizabeth tax map number 55.83-3-13, provided and on condition that they pay the outstanding base amount of $25,706.86.
Motion Paul, go out on the floor. Yes, we
Yes,
do.
you do.
Comments or questions? Roby?
Was the agreement, Dan, such that it was the responsibility of the IDA to file that form as opposed to the owner of the property?
It was. The IDA missed the filing date of the form.
Thank you.
Jerry?
As a representative from this board to the IDA board, this is the first I've heard about this. And I'm sure it'll be brought up at our next meeting. But I also am pretty sure I'm going to hear a different story there. So although I do support this, and I'd be willing to bet I'll hear a different story.
Yeah. Well,
So I guess the next question is, have you talked to the IDA?
I have not spoken directly to the IDA.
All right, so is there a reason that this would come before us today? If we have not spoken with the IDA?
No, I can speak to them, but I'm pretty confident it is what happened.
Okay.
It's happened before.
All right, thank you.
Any further comments or questions?
But I would like, well, we'll wait.
So who has offered a resolution? Mr. Morrow's offered a resolution. Do we have a second? Second, Mr. Grinnell and Mr. Moore. Further comments?
Yeah.
Mr. Scotta's
So, Elizabethtown Community Hospital is paying the $25,000?
They would pay the base amount.
The base amount. So, why is there a transfer to begin with? Why from the hospital to the IDA back to the hospital?
It's the mechanism that they use in order to get funding to the hospital. It's done quite often. It's like a sale-leaseback type of situation.
Thank you.
I don't know if Mike's here. Should we? I don't know if Mike Diskin's here.
Mike, do you have anything that you could courtesy of the floor to Mike Diskins, Mr. Connell, Mr. Gardner. Mayor Ryan. Motion carried. Thank you.
Just one brief comment, and I wish Mr. Merryle was here because he does have information about having talked to the IDA about it. And I would not want to comment without him being here, but if he was here, he could elaborate on that, but he has had conversation with the IDA about it.
Thank you, Mike.
No, that's it.
That's it. Any further comment or question on the resolution on the floor? Roby?
I guess the question is, are we on, I don't know what that was, so, are we gonna vote on this without hearing from Mr. Merryle? I mean,
If you want to make a...
I don't get that.
Shall we table it?
It's a question of us waiving the penalties and interest, or going after the IDA to pay it, and we fund the IDA, so that's coming from the same pocket.
Actually, I guess I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I don't think the issue is with the hospital. I think that, the hospital is actually, I think, paying more than they probably should have to some extent.
There's a further elaboration. I wish I had the file. I have correspondence from the IADA's attorney, Ron Briggs. I have correspondence from, initially the correspondence came from Stafford's firm. I call it Stafford's firm. It's not that firm anymore, but that firm, whatever it's named now, Kelleher, Trombley. And the back and forth had gone back and forth, and they wanted this entirely waived. Then there was a little back and forth between the IADA's attorney, Ron Briggs, and the Stafford firm as to, who was to blame and who should pay for the $25,000. That's been resolved. The hospital is willing to pay for that. So I haven't spoken directly to the IDA, but I've had correspondence with their attorney, and I've had letters back and forth with their attorney.
What brought it to light now? I mean, that's a pretty long time span, too.
Well, it's been brought to light probably for the last 3 months, but I've been going back and forth with it. The hospital wants to get on with more expansion and would like to get this out of the way, and they'd like to pay the tax.
So we didn't just learn about this. There was an outstanding tax bill hanging out there against the IDA, is what I'm would have to assume.
Well, we kind of knew about this a while ago, and it kind of got, just lost in the shuffle. And the reason we knew about it is every time we come up to do our tax foreclosures, that's on the list. And we recognize, well, there's something just not right here. So we pulled it from the list. In some instances, we'll do that if there's litigation or if there's a major problem. So we were aware of it then. And now, the letters started coming back and forth, and so now it's come to a head.
Thank you.
It should be resolved, because we can't continue to carry it.
Further comment or question? Not, roll call vote.
Mr. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Harrington?
Yes.
Mr. Merryle is excused. Mr. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Douglas?
Yes.
Mr. Farabee?
Yes.
Mr. Blades?
Yes.
Mr. McNally?
Yes.
Mr. Skozavala?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Pleady?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Marnell?
Yes.
Mr. Whitson?
Yes.
Mr. Grinnell?
Yes.
Mr. Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliland is excused. Mr. Preston?
Yes.
Resolution carries.
Any further resolutions? If not, just a couple of announcements quickly. There will be some movement on committees. I'm going to assign Supervisor Gilliland to Chair Public Safety. He'll also join the Finance team. And Supervisor Merryle will now be the Veterans Liaison. If you'll notice, both of those gentlemen are not here today. But that is not a trend that I'll use. These supervisors were aware of this appointment. So this week, Judy will get out a new revised committee list. So with that, if there's nothing further to come, Mr. Douglas.
I just want to say a closing comment, Bill, if I may. First of all, congratulations as chairman, and Mr. Preston as vice chairman. This body selected 2 decent people that will work hard on behalf of Essex County. I've seen them in action. I've worked closely with them, and I'm proud to be their friends. Second of all, I brought Archie Depot with me. If all goes as planned, we can't swear him in, Joe can't swear him in today. He's going to be sworn in by the county attorney at 4 p.m. today over in the town of Jay to take over as town of Jay supervisor, and Dan's working out all the kinks of the special elections or all those things, but so I'll let them speak to that at a later time. But I will tell you, you won't get a better man. Archie Depot is the most honest person I've ever met in my life, so you're very fortunate to have somebody that's replacing me, and I wish him all the best. In closing, I'm not so sure that all the awards and plaques and emails, cards, and resolutions are worthy, but I thank everybody. I thank my constituents for giving me this wonderful ride. I thank my wonderful family, my wife Peggy, because I don't have a new job until Friday. Somebody's got to work today to make the money. It's been a wonderful ride. I've met some interesting people, met some very good people, had many, many challenges, but it's very bittersweet to bid you all a fond farewell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Further business to come before this committee,